I knew something was off the moment I saw the shredded wrapping paper littering the doorstep of our newly purchased townhome. My heart sank because this wasn't the first time it had happened. For weeks, no, months, mysterious disappearances of my packages had soured the otherwise quiet comfort of Sable Oaks, our pristine HOA-governed neighborhood. And if that wasn't enough, an open box, torn with the violence of someone rummaging through it, sat brazenly at the entrance. It was humiliating, like someone had left a calling card reminding me, yet again, that I wasn't in control. A flash of sun glinted off the golden black HOA board member badge pinned to a woman's salmon-pink cardigan across the street. Karen, her name, was infamous from the moment I moved in. She was the exact type you'd imagine. Meticulously permed hair, hawk-like eyes scanning every front lawn for the tiniest HOA infraction, and that irritating habit of crossing her arms whenever she felt morally superior. Next to her was a small table where she was doing her usual clipboard patrol, pretending to write up violations and tisk-ing about the length of someone's grass or the color of a house's shutters. I'd only lived here 3 months, but I already suspected she was the source of my anguish. I tried giving her the benefit of the doubt when I first moved in. After all, HOAs typically had that one overzealous personality, and maybe Karen would be no more than a neighborhood busybody. But the pattern was too obvious to ignore. Packages labeled with my name kept vanishing. Some were from major online retailers, textbooks for the online class I was taking, new housewares. Others were personal gifts from my family. The final straw was the care package from my best friend, Dahlia, a heartfelt gesture meant to help me settle into my new place. It, too, disappeared one day before I found its remains in a communal trash bin, bits of bubble wrap fluttering in the wind. I hated confrontation, but I was done, so I confronted Karen in the middle of the street, my voice trembling with controlled anger. She wore an expression of pure innocence. "Me," she said, pressing a hand dramatically to her chest. "Why on earth would I take your packages? I have no interest in your Amazon orders, dear." She pronounced dear with the same condescending tone you'd use on a disobedient toddler. I wasn't convinced, but I had no proof until I did. One afternoon, I noticed a neighbor's security camera tucked in the eaves of their porch. I asked if they'd mind scrolling through footage from the day one of my missing deliveries had arrived. That's when I got my smoking gun, a low-resolution clip of Karen, in that unmistakable salmon cardigan, creeping up my front walkway and crouching to pick up my package. She tucked it under her arm, checked to see if anyone was watching, then scurried away. My neighbor was shocked. I was livid. I'd never been so sure about what I had to do next. But I didn't just want to call the police or report it to the HOA. Laughable, given she was on the board. After all, petty theft is petty theft. Yet I craved justice in a more direct way. She'd made my life miserable with her self-righteousness, her endless citations for unapproved lawn decorations, and now blatant theft. If the HOA Karen was going to stoop to filching my stuff, I want to see her reaction when she finally opened a package that didn't contain something she could keep. The idea came to me almost by accident. A friend from college worked at a wildlife rehabilitation center. We'd been talking over coffee about my situation, and half-jokingly, I said, I'd love to put something smelly in a box for her. My friend's eyes lit up with a mischievous spark. "I have a rescue skunk," she whispered. "She can't spray as strongly as a wild skunk, but you might get her to release a little odor if startled enough." I let out a startled laugh. "You're kidding, right?" She wasn't. And that was how I found myself hatching a plan so absurd. It felt like something out of a bad TV prank show. In normal circumstances, I would never have considered using a wild animal, especially one as infamous for its scent bombs as a skunk, for any kind of revenge. But desperation made me bold. I'd been humiliated, robbed, and condescended to for long enough. A whiff of comedic justice began filling my mind. Of course, I wasn't going to harm the skunk. That was non-negotiable. Also, I needed to ensure I wasn't risking anyone else's safety. So I laid down some ground rules with my friend. We'd use a docile rescue skunk that was nearly ready for release. We'd keep it contained in a comfortable carrier disguised as a cardboard box. And we'd time it so that the skunk would only be temporarily placed there long enough for Karen to pick up the box. Once she opened it, and presumably got blasted with the skunk's mild but still potent scent, we'd retrieve the animal immediately. Overly elaborate? Maybe. Potentially risky? Definitely. But after all those months of stolen packages, it was worth the risk. There's a certain satisfaction in outsmarting someone who preys on your vulnerabilities. Karen had pushed me to the edge, and if the HOA wouldn't hold her accountable, well, I'd deliver my own brand of retribution, literally. I carefully arranged everything: the packaging, the decoy label, and my friend's availability. But as I prepared for this twisted box trap, I had no idea how complicated things would get. Because Karen wasn't just a petty package thief, she was far more vindictive than I ever imagined. And if I thought I could control the outcome of my cunning plan, I was sorely mistaken. 2 nights before the planned delivery, I lay awake in bed, mentally going through the blueprint of the scheme. The ultimate goal was simple: let Karen pick up what she believes is another stolen Amazon box from my front porch, wait for her to pry it open, and watch her scramble as the skunk's mild spray sets everything into an odoriferous uproar. My biggest concern revolved around the well-being of the skunk. I'd never handled one before, and I didn't exactly know how quickly or strongly a skunk would spray. My friend from the Wildlife Center, Keisha, assured me that this particular rescue, nicknamed Marshmallow, had a less intense odor due to a partial gland issue. She's not completely descented, Keisha said, but her defense mechanism isn't as nuclear as a wild skunk's. It's more like a strong, musty stink. Still unpleasant, but it won't clear out an entire city block. Relief washed over me, albeit laced with a residual anxiety. This plan was obviously well outside the lines of normal neighborly disputes. Growing up, my parents had always taught me the straight and narrow path of conflict resolution: talk it out or involve authorities. But that approach had led nowhere with Karen. She was cunning, dismissive, and entrenched in her little kingdom as the self-appointed HOA tyrant. Approaching the police might work if I had enough high-quality proof, but I tried reasoning, warnings, and showing the blurry camera footage to the HOA. They gave me lip service, but no real action. It made me question who was actually in charge, me or the Karen who was apparently above the rules. Early the next morning, I double-checked the camera footage again, scanning for the best vantage point to capture the deed. I planned to place a second camera and a potted plant near my door for a close-up of Karen's reaction. This was partially for my own twisted satisfaction, but also, I feared she might retaliate by claiming she was attacked or set up. In a way, she'd be right. I was setting her up. But if she tried to sue me or slander me within the HOA, I wanted evidence that she trespassed on my property and opened a clearly marked package that wasn't hers. The rest of that day blurred into a combination of final preparations and quiet dread. I was no criminal mastermind, and the sheer novelty of smuggling a skunk was enough to keep my pulse racing. Keisha arrived that evening with a small pet carrier, the kind used for cats or rabbits, and introduced me to Marshmallow. The skunk was surprisingly cute, with her black fur broken by wide white stripes. She had a tiny pink nose that twitched whenever I spoke. "She's used to people," Keisha said. "But obviously, don't startle her. If you move slowly, she'll stay calm. She tends to spray only if she feels threatened." I nodded, swallowing a lump of fear. Marshmallow sniffed at my hand through the carrier. I felt the bizarre sense that we were co-conspirators, the two of us locked into a mission with questionable ethics, but unstoppable momentum. That night, I placed the package outside my front door. It was a makeshift cardboard box with a discreet hinged top, carefully constructed so that from the outside, it looked sealed. The inside had ample room for Marshmallow's carrier, plus ventilation holes that resembled normal shipping box slits. Keisha would be hiding in my house, ready to remove Marshmallow at a moment's notice once Karen took the bait. Our plan hinged on a hunch. Karen often snatched packages within minutes or hours of their arrival. She was annoyingly vigilant, especially if I left the house for any reason. So, the next morning, I purposely backed out of my driveway in a hurry and drove down the street. I parked just around the corner, out of sight, and marched back on foot to a side alley that led to my back door. Once inside, I stationed myself in the living room, heart racing, waiting for the spectacle to unfold. The hours crawled by. My phone's screen glowed with idle social media scrolling, but I couldn't concentrate on anything. I just kept glancing at the feed from the live camera. By noon, Karen hadn't struck. Afternoon turned into early evening, and still no sign of that salmon cardigan or her watchful gaze. For the first time, I started to wonder if maybe she was onto me. Paranoia twisted my stomach. Had she guessed this was a trap? Did she see me setting up the decoy? Was she lying low, waiting for me to give up? With mounting anxiety, Keisha and I decided to bring Marshmallow inside for a quick break. I couldn't keep an animal out in a box all day, even if the weather was mild. So we repeated the entire routine the next day. Another morning of sneaking out, another anxious stakeout from behind drawn curtains. It was like we were playing spy games in the suburbs, neither party willing to make the first move. Then, on the second day, late afternoon, there she was. The porch camera blinked, and I saw Karen's silhouette gliding up my walkway. My heart shot in my throat. She wore her signature expression, that smug little grin, as though she were the star in a moral drama where everyone else is a villain. She hesitated for half a second, probably scanning for witnesses. Then, in a single motion, she bent down, scooped up the box, and hustled away around the side of my house. Keisha and I scrambled into action. I snatched my phone and started the video recording. Keisha got ready with a pair of gloves because once the skunk sprayed, we wanted to retrieve Marshmallow calmly. This was it, the moment I've been obsessing over for weeks, about to play out in real time. I felt a pang of guilt, too, because the skunk was innocent in all this. But I steel my nerves. Karen was literally walking off my property with my package in broad daylight. That's when things got infinitely more complicated. I dashed to my side window, which offered a partial view of my driveway and the alley that led to Karen's property. The plan was for Karen to take the package inside her house, presumably tear it open and get a noseful of skunk surprise. Then, Keisha and I would intervene quickly to retrieve Marshmallow. If everything went off without a hitch, we'd have the perfect piece of video evidence and a comedic story for the ages. But instead of heading toward her own house, Karen made a beeline toward the HOA clubhouse located at the end of the block. My jaw practically hit the floor. The box in her arms, she slipped around the side of the clubhouse. A swirl of questions assaulted my mind. Why there? Was she planning to stash it somewhere else first, in case I came looking? Did she suspect it was a trap? My vantage point was limited, but I could see that she'd paused near the clubhouse's back entrance. Keisha shot me a frantic look. If she opens that box out of sight, I won't be able to reach Marshmallow quickly. We can't just let Marshmallow wander or risk hurting someone else. I nodded, adrenaline flooding my system. The original plan had never accounted for Karen taking the package anywhere but her home. Without hesitation, I bolted out my back door, staying low and hugging the fence line. I caught glimpses of Karen as she fiddled with the door behind the clubhouse. It looked locked, but she was an HOA board member. Maybe she had a key. Sure enough, she produced a ring of keys and unlocked the clubhouse. My stomach dropped. If she opened that box inside, the skunk might spray. Anyone inside, or who came by next, could be caught in the crossfire. This fiasco was spiraling out of my control. Keisha tugged on my sleeve, whispering, "We need to do something now." Together, we crept through neighbors' yards, trying to keep Karen within sight. After she disappeared inside, we heard the heavy door click shut. My pulse pounded in my temples. I scurried to the side window of the clubhouse, the one that faced the rear garden. Usually, the HOA held craft nights and board meetings in there, so the windows were at chest height. I peeked in, carefully pressing my face to the glass. The room was empty, the overhead lights off. Just as my heartbeat started to calm, a flicker of motion caught my eye. Karen was crossing the far side of the main hall, heading toward what looked like a storeroom. I guess she wanted a private place to rummage through my stolen goods. Maybe. I signaled Keisha, and we darted to the next window, crouching behind the neatly trimmed shrubs. Inside, Karen set the box on a folding table and glanced around nervously. I checked my phone camera feed. The small device hidden in the box's flap was still transmitting. Through that camera's vantage point, I saw her grin with glee as she prepared to rip open the cardboard top. My stomach did a somersault. This was the big moment. I watched as Karen pried open the box, ignoring the bright label with my name on it. She froze for a heartbeat, seeing the pet carrier's plastic walls and the black and white fur inside. For a split second, confusion rippled across her face. Then, Marshmallow moved. Karen jolted back, letting out a muffled shriek. She flapped her hands in panic as Marshmallow lifted her tail, presumably feeling threatened by the sudden commotion. In an instant, Karen was gagging, arms flailing. She knocked the box to the floor, tipping the carrier onto its side. I couldn't hear everything clearly through the window, but the partial hiss of the spray was enough to know Marshmallow had unleashed her stench, albeit the milder version Keisha had described. Karen stumbled back, coughing and retching. A swirl of triumphant glee surged through me, until I realized the carrier door had popped open when it hit the floor. My heart dropped. Marshmallow was free. She scurried across the polished tile floor, tail twitching in fear. If Karen cornered her again, the skunk might keep spraying, or worse, run deeper into the building. And if Marshmallow got spooked enough to hide in some locked closet, retrieving her might be a nightmare. At that moment, Karen let out a shrill, panicked wail and lunged at the skunk with a folding chair, completely overreacting. She wasn't trying to gently shoo Marshmallow. She looked like she wanted to flatten her. Rage flickered in my mind. Sure, Marshmallow was technically a weapon of stinky revenge, but she was also a living creature who didn't deserve harm. Without thinking, I sprinted around the side of the building to the front door, where that ring of keys might still be in the lock or maybe left inside. My plan was to barge in before Karen could do anything worse. Keisha followed, breathless, urging me not to burst in too loudly and scare Marshmallow more. But there was no time. I flung open the unlocked door and ran into the storeroom. Karen, red-faced, watery-eyed, stood near a toppled table. The pungent odor hit me like a punch to the face, making my eyes water. On the floor near the far wall, Marshmallow was trembling. "You," Karen wheezed, voice soaked with outrage. "What did you do?" Ignoring her screech, I darted over to Marshmallow, scooping her up carefully with Keisha's help. The skunk whined, but once she recognized Keisha, she didn't fight. Karen was yelling something about vandalism and assault, but in that moment, all I cared about was getting Marshmallow safely back into the carrier. The entire space stank like rotten eggs mixed with burnt rubber, enough to make me gag. "You stole my package," I snapped, turning to face Karen. "You broke into it. This is your own fault." Karen's eyes bulged. She was furious, but she also looked humiliated. She had one hand pressed against her nose, tears streaming down her cheeks from the fumes. She sputtered a litany of threats, calling the HOA board, calling the police, suing me for endangering her well-being. My adrenaline soared. This wasn't the comedic comeuppance I'd dreamed of. This was a full-blown meltdown in the HOA clubhouse, with a traumatized skunk and one insanely irate neighbor. Then, as if on cue, the front door of the clubhouse swung open again. Another board member, Marta, stepped in, apparently lured by the ruckus. The second she caught wind of the smell, she gagged. Her eyes flicked from me, cradling a skunk in my arms, to Karen, half crying amid a mess of cardboard and stolen goods. "What is going on here?" Marta demanded, her voice muffled behind the hand covering her mouth. I felt like the world was tilting. My plan was supposed to end with a quick comedic victory, maybe a short video, for proof. Now I was in the middle of a fiasco with an audience, stinking up HOA property. And I could almost see the catastrophic consequences swirling in Karen's twisted mind. She'd turn this around somehow and make me the villain. Well, I wasn't about to let that happen. For a moment, none of us spoke. Karen's furious panting filled the silence, broken only by the echo of Marshmallow's soft whimper. The stink in the air was truly wretched, even though it was supposedly less intense than a fully wild skunk spray. Marta pressed her palm to her mouth, looking seconds away from bolting outside for fresh air. Meanwhile, I tried to steady my voice before explaining. It was Karen who broke the silence, her voice dripping with righteous indignation. She's brought a wild animal onto HOA property. This is a health hazard. She's tried to assault me. I nearly dropped Marshmallow in disbelief. Assault you? You stole my package. I have video proof. You literally used your HOA key to break into the clubhouse to open a box that wasn't yours. Karen's flushed cheeks paled slightly. I knew she had no defense for that. But predictably, she doubled down. That box was suspicious. As a board member, I was investigating a possible safety threat to the community. And now look, there's a skunk inside. She pointed dramatically at Marshmallow, as if brandishing Exhibit A. Marta stared at both of us, her eyes shifting back and forth. She was clearly overwhelmed by the pungent odor and the intensity of the argument. Wait, she said, still keeping her nose covered. One at a time. I need to understand what's happening. My pulse hammered as I tried to keep a level tone. I have multiple deliveries that have been stolen. I placed a bait package on my porch. Karen took it. There's footage of her opening it. The skunk, Marshmallow, is a rescue and a carrier inside that box, which is absolutely insane. Karen interjected, tears still leaking from her irritated eyes. She set a trap, Marta, for me, with a skunk, on purpose. I tightened my grip on Marshmallow, not specifically for you. Although, yes, I suspected you were the thief. But this is a rescue skunk who can't fully spray. She was never going to do real harm. I just wanted to catch the culprit. And you walked off my property with the box. Marta let out a shaky breath, looking from Karen to me. This is not how we resolve disputes. You're telling me you used a skunk to catch a thief. And I did catch her. I shot back. My frustration soared, but I tried to rein it in. I had to appear calm and rational, especially since Karen looked on the verge of hysterics. I'm sorry this fiasco spilled over into the clubhouse, I added, glancing at the scattered boxes and the acrid haze of skunk odor. But Karen's the one who decided to bring my package in here. Karen inhaled sharply, her face still wet with tears. I cannot believe you're blaming me. I was protecting the neighborhood. Who else would be leaving suspicious boxes on the porch after all these alleged thefts? The irony nearly floored me. I wanted to scream that she was the suspicious one, the actual cause of the thefts. But Marta spoke first. Okay, enough. Both of you. I can't breathe in here. Let's move this outside. She marched toward the door, motioning for us to follow. The stench trailed after us like a noxious cloud. Out in the fresh air, Marta stood on the clubhouse stoop, hands on her hips. We need the rest of the board involved. Karen, this is serious. Stealing another resident's mail is a federal offense. And she paused, leveling her gaze at me. Setting a trap with a wild animal is, at the very least, reckless. We need to get to the bottom of this. Right now. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. She was trembling with humiliation and anger. I could practically see her mind whirling with ways to turn Marta against me. But Marta was no fool. She might not condone my method, but she seemed to sense Karen's complicity, especially with the stolen box fiasco staring us in the face. I have all the evidence, I said quietly. Video footage from my neighbor's camera showing Karen stealing packages. And from today, a live feed from inside the decoy box itself. Karen visibly paled. She glanced around, probably hoping for some ally among the usual HOA loyalists. No one else was around except Keisha, who was standing protectively by me and Marshmallow. I suggest, said Marta, her composure returning, that we call an emergency board meeting. We will review your footage, talk this out, and handle it through official channels. No more wild animals, no more stolen packages, just a proper resolution. I breathed an internal sigh of relief, though it was tempered by the stench still clinging to my clothes. This was not the comedic ending I'd fantasized about, but it was, in a sense, a turning point. Karen had been caught in the act. She couldn't pretend innocence anymore. And with any luck, she'd be forced off the board or maybe even face police charges. Karen, however, had other ideas. She threw me a look of seething hatred, ignoring Marta's call for calm. I'm calling the police, she announced, fumbling for her phone. You can't just assault me with a skunk and think you'll get away with it. The mention of the police twisted my stomach. What if I got in serious legal trouble for orchestrating this stunt? Sure, I had proof she stole my box, but what if she claimed I endangered her with a wild animal? My mind flashed through worst-case scenarios. Lawsuits, the police confiscating Marshmallow, reputational ruin in the neighborhood. As though sensing my tension, Keisha placed a hand on my arm. "We should let the police come," she said softly. "You have the camera footage. She was trespassing and stealing mail. This is on her. We'll explain everything calmly." Karen was already barking in her phone. "Yes, I need to report an assault. The suspect used a skunk as a weapon." She paused, then screeched, "No, I'm not joking." Marta shook her head. "This is out of hand. But fine, let the authorities sort it out. Just know that the board will also be reviewing your actions, Karen." And so we found ourselves in a standoff outside the HOA clubhouse. The sun dipping toward the horizon, the pungent odor of skunk spray lingering in the humid air. I could feel waves of anxiety and adrenaline colliding in my chest. The comedic plan had morphed into a civic showdown that could shape my entire future in Sable Oaks. But beneath the nerves, a thread of resolve pulled tight. I'd endured Karen's tyranny for too long. Package theft was a crime. She had no right to my belongings. If the police asked me why I set a trap, I'd tell the truth. I'd show them the footage of her creeping onto my porch, time after time, stealing what wasn't hers. Let them see who the real aggressor was. Maybe it wasn't the neat victory I'd hoped for, but it was the path to the truth. It took the local police about 15 minutes to arrive, which felt like an eternity as we waited outside in the thick evening air. Karen stayed several paces away from me, still coughing from time to time, her eyes rimmed red from the skunk's odor. She looked ready to spit nails. Marta hovered nearby, arms crossed, as if worried any moment we'd resume bickering or come to blows. Keisha tried to comfort Marshmallow, who was calm but clearly overstimulated by all the commotion. 2 officers pulled up in a squad car. The lead officer, a tall woman with dark hair pulled into a bun, wrinkled her nose the moment she stepped out. "What does that smell?" she asked, half in disbelief. I stepped forward, hugging Marshmallow's carrier. "It's a skunk." She sprayed, briefly, when my neighbor opened a box she stole from me. The officer blinked. Clearly, she wasn't expecting that explanation. She exchanged a glance with her partner, then looked at Karen. "Ma'am, you called us. You said there was an assault?" Karen lifted her chin, though tears of indignation and the lingering stench still clung to her. "Yes, she set a trap on her porch with a skunk inside. I picked up the package because I was investigating suspicious deliveries. She's been putting the entire neighborhood at risk. The skunk sprayed me. That's assault with a dangerous animal." To my relief, the officer didn't just swallow Karen's story. She turned to me. "Is that true? You left a package outside with a skunk inside it." I exhaled slowly, determined to keep my voice steady. "Yes, I did, but only because I have video proof she's been stealing my mail. I put a decoy package to catch whoever was doing it. She took it off my porch. The skunk is a rescue with limited spray capacity. I never intended for it to harm anyone, just to deter theft and catch the person red-handed." Karen gasped, clinging to the word harm. But I pressed on. "I have camera footage, both from my neighbor's external security cam and from a small camera hidden in the box. It shows her taking my property. Today, instead of taking the package to her own home, she broke into the HOA clubhouse to open it. That's when Marshmallow sprayed." Marta stepped in, nodding. "Officer, I'm on the HOA board with Karen. This building was locked, and Karen used her board key. She had no permission to bring that package inside. Then, well, you can see what happened." She gestured at the lingering cloud of stink. The officer scribbled notes, eyebrows furrowed. "Mail theft is a serious crime," she said, glancing at Karen. "Is the package addressed to you?" I nodded, fishing out the shipping label from my pocket. "It clearly has my name and address. Karen isn't authorized to pick it up." Karen opened her mouth, but the officer held up a hand. "Ma'am, let me get this straight. You took a package that wasn't yours from this individual's porch, brought it here, and opened it." Karen stammered. I told you it was suspicious. Who put a large package on their porch for 2 days in a row? I was investigating a potential threat. And you didn't call the police or..." any authority. You just took it upon yourself to move private property and open it. The officer's voice was calm but stern. Karen flushed. She fumbled for words. Well, as an HOA board member, I have the authority to investigate. The officer shook her head. That's not how it works, ma'am. Even if you suspected something dangerous, you should have contacted law enforcement. Taking another person's mail is theft, plain and simple, regardless of your intentions. Now, as for you, she turned to me, I'll need to review the videos. While it's not illegal to film on your property, the use of a live animal in a trap might present some legal issues if it's considered reckless endangerment. We'll have to see. A wave of anxiety rippled through me, but I nodded. I understand. My friend here is a licensed wildlife rehabilitator. The skunk isn't fully wild, and it's under her care. We took precautions. We never intended to leave it out in extreme conditions or let it roam free. And I have proof that the target of this trap was specifically the thief. The officer gave a slow nod. Show me the footage. I retrieved my phone, pulling up the recorded clips. The first video showed Karen skulking up my porch, grabbing the package. The second video, from inside the box, showed her opening it in the clubhouse. While the angle was shaky, it clearly revealed her face the moment she realized there was a skunk inside, and how she panicked. Finally, the footage ended with the box toppling as Marshmallow scrambled out. Karen looked increasingly mortified with each passing second of footage. The officer flicked her gaze between Karen and me. Finally, she sighed. All right, here's what's going to happen, ma'am. She nodded at Karen. I need to take your statement. But based on the evidence, you're likely facing charges for mail theft and possibly trespassing. As for you, turning to me, I'm going to document everything and forward it to the district attorney. They may have questions about whether your use of the skunk constitutes a form of assault or animal misuse. But if everything you said checks out, you might just get a warning about not using living creatures in vigilante stunts. I suppressed a groan of relief. It wasn't a guarantee, but it sounded like the officer understood that Karen was the real culprit here. Karen, realizing the tables had turned, started sobbing. It wasn't a gentle cry of regret. It was an ugly, desperate wail. You can't do this to me. I'm on the board. I was only protecting the community. She spiraled into a monologue about how the neighborhood was going downhill, how no one respected the HOA rules. The officer calmly took her statement, but I doubted any of it would absolve her. Marta turned away, as if she couldn't bear to watch Karen degrade herself further. Eventually, the officers guided Karen to their squad car for a more private discussion. Keisha and I stood by with Marshmallow, who I had carefully placed back in her carrier with the door locked. Marta exhaled, rubbing her temples. This is going to be a nightmare for the HOA, she said. And she looked at me. But honestly, Karen's been out of control for a while. Maybe this is what it takes for some real change around here. I just wish it didn't involve a skunk in the clubhouse. Despite the tension, a tired smile tugged at my lips. I'm sorry for the mess and the smell. I really didn't think it would go this far. She gave a small shrug. Sometimes, it takes a little chaos to weed out the real trouble. Don't worry, you'll have a chance to explain yourself at the next board meeting. I think you'll be surprised how many neighbors are fed up with Karen's antics. Relief washed over me. We parted ways shortly after, with the police finishing their on-site investigation and telling me I'd be contacted if more information was needed. Karen's meltdown subsided into furious silence. She gave me one final death glare as she climbed in her car, her clothes still reeking of skunk. I didn't exactly relish her suffering, but then again, I couldn't ignore the swirl of vindication I felt deep down. Maybe, at long last, her reign of petty tyranny was ending. Keisha helped me load Marshmallow in her car, promising to give her a nice bath and plenty of treats. We'll find her a safe place to release soon, Keisha said. And hey, next time you need to catch a thief, maybe a simple method? I laughed shakily, exhaustion gnawing at me. Yeah, definitely simpler next time. Though I can't deny, it was satisfying. In the weeks that followed, the HOA held a formal hearing. Karen was removed from her board position. Turns out, multiple residents had footage of her pilfering their mail, too. A handful of folks pressed charges, and the police followed up on my case as well. Ultimately, the DA decided I was irresponsible but not criminal in my use of the skunk trap. I got a stern warning and had to pay a small fine for disturbing the peace, but nothing compared to what Karen faced. She ended up pleading down to a misdemeanor for mail theft, was forced to resign from the HOA board, and moved out of Sable Oaks shortly afterward. The smell from the clubhouse lingered for a while. Some said it was a reminder of how tyranny can stink up a neighborhood if left unchecked. As for me, I learned a lot about boundaries, consequences, and the power of creativity, even if it was misguided. People still whisper about the skunk incident, but more often than not, they share it with a chuckle and a sense of relief that Karen's days of petty theft are over. And to be honest, whenever I get a new delivery, I can't help but smile. This time, no one dares to steal it. Because after all, who wants to risk another run-in with my black and white friend? End.